Coming Back is a listener-supported podcast. To support the show and get exclusive access to podcast swag, giveaways, private grief hangouts, and more, head on over to patreon.com/ShelbyForsythia. Support the show for as little as $1 per month and change or cancel your support at any time. Thank you so much for listening. Grief growers, I am also setting sail on the 2019 Bereavement Cruise. To join me and a boatload of other grieving hearts as we travel to Haiti, Jamaica, and Mexico, go to www.comingbackcruise.com, where you can sign up to receive more information on the cruise's sail dates, grief presenters, and onboard activities. I'll see you on the open seas. Hi there, and welcome to Coming Back, a podcast about coming back to life after loss. On today's show, I'm speaking to musician Ruth Ungar, who is one piece of the popular folk rock band The Mammals. We're talking about the loss of her dear friend Hubie and how she found out about his death on Facebook. Also on the show today, a listener wrote in asking for resources on navigating hospice care for the first time. I'm Shelby Forsythia, an intuitive grief guide who speaks, writes, and teaches powerful truths on grief and loss. My mom's death in 2013 set me on the path to becoming a lifelong student of grief, and I use what I learned to equip others with the knowledge to heal and remind them that they are not alone. Because even through grief, we are growing. Let's get started. Hi there, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Coming Back. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Really quick, I just want to say a huge, ginormous thank you to everyone who is signing up to join me on the 2019 Bereavement Cruise. Every single month, me and my fellow onboard presenters jump onto a conference call together. We're all on the phone together once a month. And just last night for our conference call, I found out that 4 of you grief growers have now signed up and booked your rooms on the Oasis of the Seas with me. I absolutely cannot wait to meet you and to shake your hands and to get connected outside of the podcast. If you're interested in coming with us to Haiti and Jamaica and Mexico and working on your grief along the way, please apply to receive more information now at www.comingbackcruise.com or by clicking the announcement bar at the homepage of my website, which is shelbyforsythia.com. And of course, you can always find both of those links in the show notes. So this week, I had a listener write in asking for resources for family and friends navigating the hospice process for the first time in regards to a loved one who needs it. And I think this is such a wonderful question and applies to so many people who have ears on the show. If you're listening to the show right now, you've either had someone in hospice, you currently have someone in hospice, or you will probably be faced with getting hospice care for somebody in the future. It might not be the near future, but it will be the future for you. So for those of you who don't know or are a little bit foggy on the subject of hospice, hospice care is a type of medical treatment and holistic treatment that is given to people who are no longer interested in or can no longer receive curative treatment. So hospice can be called into a person's home or take place in a nursing home or a hospice care facility. It's something that is usually recommended by a physician or a doctor who's determined that treatments to cure whatever they have are no longer effective and or the patient that they're working with has less than 6 months to live, depending on the type of illness. However, anybody, you don't have to be a doctor, anybody, including family members, friends, religious representatives, clergy folks, neighbors, can refer you or your loved one to hospice. Even you yourself can pick up the phone and call your local hospice center for more information. And hospice is covered by Medicaid, Medicare, and most insurance plans. If you're looking for a conversation of coming back to convince you to call hospice, I highly, highly recommend that you go back and listen to episode 36 of Coming Back. And this is with Carrie Egan, who herself is a hospice chaplain. In our conversation together, she stresses that the best time to call hospice is as soon as possible. So pretty much as soon as the thought crosses your mind that you might need hospice, either start talking to your doctor about calling or call yourself. That way, the hospice nurses, the chaplains, and the other team members that are a part of their staff have time to really get to know you and your loved one and make sure that your loved one's care is extra personal. She reminds us all on episode 36 that hospice workers are by no means angels of death, and they do not make people die. They just make the process of dying more comfortable, and frankly, the sooner you call, more human. You get more of that personal interaction in the last stages of life. Just doing some research for this listener question, I stumbled on several blogs from hospice nurses, which is kind of cool to me. And many told stories of things like finagling a minister and flowers. So a woman's daughter could do a mock wedding ceremony with her husband to be at the foot of her bed before she died. Another blog mentioned how often hospice patients just want to feel pretty or cared for, and so they have spa days where they'll call in masseuses or manicurists for all of the patients on their floor. And you can also read accounts of one-on-one hospice experiences in Carrie Egan's book, which I absolutely love, and this is called On Living. This is one of my all-time favorite books on grief, but really gives a beautiful picture of the role of hospice chaplains and caretakers during people's final months of life. And in that book, you'll see her reading to patients, talking to patients, asking about their families and their lives, and kind of just reflecting on what it's like to die. And these are all really important conversations to be having. Another great resource I found for navigating hospice for the very first time is hospicefoundation.org, and this is the Hospice Foundation of America. I'm sure there's others for other hospices around the world, but I really like the Hospice Foundation of America because under the hospice care tag, they have sections for what is hospice, starting the conversation. So there's tips to get your doctor and your loved one on board with the concept of hospice and the reality of hospice. And then the last little bit that I really like is called Dispelling Hospice Myths. And this has things like hospice is where you go when you die. Hospice is only for cancer patients. Hospice means giving up on the life of my loved one. And I feel like this page is a lot like this podcast, where you're presented with society's way of thinking about things, but then you get the reality of hospice and how it actually interacts as an organization with death and the people who are electing to have hospice care. One last thing that I want to note on that I really, really like about hospice, and something you might want to look into if you're looking into hospice for the first time, is the services that they provide for caregivers. They have something called short-term respite care for caregivers, and so this is these are things like if you need to travel, hospice can take over full-time care for your loved one. And they also offer services for caregivers like grief care. So things like talking about anticipatory grief, which we've done on this podcast. So the grief of watching someone die. So they're not actually dead yet, but leading up to a death, the grief that you feel of losing small pieces of them. And afterwards, they offer up to 13 months of supportive grief care for the caregivers, the family, and the friends of people surrounding the person who is dying. And so they do a lot to kind of extend the circle out. And it's neat to me because I sense that their vision of death is not just patient-focused or singular person-focused, but they really kind of radiate out and expand to include everyone whom this death is touching. And that's really cool to me. So listener, for you and everybody else out there who is approaching hospice for the first time, I'll put some links in the show notes for you. I'll put in Coming Back episode 36 with Carrie Egan if you'd like to listen to our full conversation. I'll also put in the Hospice Foundation of America's website and some hospice FAQs. So if you'd like to do some more research on your own outside of the resources that I'm putting in the show notes today, I would highly, highly recommend. These were just some Google searches that I did. Google search hospice nurse blog, and you can find personal stories from people who are working in hospice. You can also search hospice first time, and this is resources for like starting the conversation with a doctor, approaching a loved one about how they want to die, talking to kids, talking to other relatives, talking to spouses about hospice care in your home, etc., etc. And then the last one I think is helpful for you also is hospice for blank, and in the blank, insert your loved one's health condition. So hospice for cancer, hospice for dementia, hospice for Alzheimer's, and you'll get some more specific answers about exactly what that looks like for you. And being armed with more information, it doesn't necessarily make the situation better, but you feel or can feel like you have a little bit more control, like some more wisdom, some more knowledge, and so you're not going to be going into this situation totally blind. This week, I'm going to devote my Facebook Live to talking about hospice and where you can find resources that help you navigate hospice for a loved one for the first time. I would absolutely love, grief growers, if you joined me and contributed your own resources or stories of hospice care for your family and your friends. I'll be going live this Monday, July 2nd at 1 o'clock Central Time, and all you have to do to join us is like my Facebook page, Shelby Forsythia Intuitive Grief Guide, to be notified when that broadcast begins. Next up, I'm talking to Ruth Ungar, who found out about her friend's death through Facebook, and the song that she wrote to honor her own death when it comes. Ruth Ungar is a songwriter, vocalist, mother, festival organizer, and all-around creative. She tours and performs with her husband Mike in the band The Mammals, and makes her home in the Hudson Valley of New York State on the banks of the Ashokan Reservoir. Her father composed the fiddle tune Ashokan Farewell, which was used as the theme of Ken Burns' Civil War series on PBS, and her mother is a fine folk and country singer. Ruth grew up knowing that the power of music can make people cry and can also heal the soul. Thank you so much for coming back, and I'm so excited to have you on the show today to talk about how grief has informed your music. So Ruth, if you could please share your loss story with us.
Well, I had a really close friend in college who was part of a very closely knit group of friends that were in the theater department. And we did so many plays together and really remained friends after graduating. Although we were in different places, we stayed in touch through the process of evolving out of our college personas and into grown-ups, having kids, becoming parents. I think the last text we traded was me recommending a babysitter or him recommending one to me. I can't even remember which, actually, but that was sort of what had, become of our current connection. But he just suddenly died of a heart attack. We were on tour. My husband and I are musicians, and we were on tour actually in New Hampshire, which is where he grew up and where he was celebrated and mourned and all. Oddly, we happened to just actually be in the right part of the country, and we just sort of got a hotel room and didn't go anywhere and awaited the throngs of people that showed up to remember him. And it was the middle of October. There was a vibrant rainbow of color in the maple trees. There was an incredibly moving service, I'll call it, but it was really just a gathering of family and friends like I've really never seen in my life. It was a completely shocking and moving and sort of a pivotal moment for me, because it's really my first close friend of my age that I lost. And the song, When My Story Ends, is a bit related to that, because we didn't get to say goodbye to each other. And that's something that's really hard to make peace with, because he's somebody I would like, I didn't see every day anymore. So in a sense, nothing's different. But I know that I won't get that other hug or that other moment of remembrance of the old days. And he was one of those people who had an incredibly good memory for stories that I had forgotten. So the song just digs into that feeling of what happens when you don't say goodbye, and wishing that we could all say goodbye. Some people have the opportunity to say goodbye because they know that they're dying, and that has another heaviness with it. And I guess I guess I was just examining from all sides as I wrote the song and really feeling the feeling, and letting that loss translate through the song, because I know it's something that other people will undoubtedly relate to on one level or another.
Absolutely. And I think that rings true, not only with me, but with so many other grief growers who are tuning into the podcast today as being robbed of that opportunity to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, you said this was the first loss of someone who was kind of in your age group, but what had loss taught you beforehand, or what losses maybe had you experienced beforehand that would lead up to this?
Well, I guess if I had to go back, I'm a child of divorce, and an only child, so that would have been number one right there. When I was about 7.5 and my parents split up, I can still remember them talking to me and sitting down, and I was sitting on a braided wool rug in the middle of the living room in the house in which I currently live with my family.
That's an interesting story there, isn't it?
Yeah, we ended up moving here, Mike and I, in our 20s. We've been here 17, 18 years almost now, and we have a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old, and live in the house I grew up in and experienced so much. And so, yeah, it took a while we've been here long enough now that I feel like I've, saged every corner and made it my own, let it breathe into a new chapter. But, yeah, I'm here right now. This is the place where I saw my little perfect trinity of mom, dad, and me turn into something new, which was, totally bewildering and unexpected. And I know I have, maybe half of my friends, our parents are divorced, so it didn't feel like there was a stigma attached to it, which I think is different than my parents' generation. But it still had the very personal grief that goes along with losing this shape of a family that you thought was completely concrete and eternal. So, yeah, that was the beginning of grieving, I guess. And I didn't really probably put it into those words at that age, but I definitely witnessed both my parents as well, even though it was somewhat of a mutual decision. I think they both took several years to sort through it. And we all got, I got closer with both of them maybe as a result. And they're still quite good friends, which is pretty inspiring. They help each other out and are connected, unlike many divorced parents. So pretty grateful for that. But it was hard as a kid.
I hear that for you, absolutely. And I'm kind of wondering, something's kind of popping into my brain right now that might also apply to the loss of your college friend. And that is kind of, what did you do to reclaim these spaces that you associated with loss, both this home that you live in now, which you say you saged, which is one way to definitely reclaim space energetically. But in addition, maybe this town that you went to while you were on tour, or maybe other places that you shared together, just the idea of reclaiming space in regards to loss. How have you done that?
Well, that's really interesting. I think that I go to nature. I really connected as a kid to planting an herb garden.
Huh.
It never thrived, but but I remember it was mine. My mom is an incredible gardener, and I've never achieved anything along the lines of her gardening success and just innate green thumb. But I was inspired by it, I guess. And notably, after my folks got divorced, I was raised by my dad, and my mom was the weekend and summer parent, which was pretty apropos and fun. And my dad was the responsible weekday parent. And so maybe when I missed her throughout the week, maybe that was when I would find that patch of dirt and, really dig my fingers and my nails into it. I haven't thought about that in so long.
I love that for
This
you.
is pretty moving stuff, actually. But the sights and smells of doing that, and just that feeling that it was growing and that it was being nurtured by me. Maybe that was in part. I think that's what we do. I've seen even my kids, if my daughter is upset, she'll sometimes comfort a doll or stuffed animal. It's almost, it's a thing we do, isn't it?
Right. Well, we have a tendency sometimes to transmit our grief to physical places or physical objects, or our missing or our longing, or yes, absolutely. And I like the metaphor of gardening too, but that's one that I use quite a bit in my grief work with the grief growers and the idea of coming back, like flowers and plants come back every single year.
I'm almost getting goosebumps thinking about this herb garden thing because maybe about 10 years ago, my stepmom, who I'm also very close with, had brain surgery that didn't go very well the first time. They eventually went back in and got everything, and she's doing great. In fact, you probably wouldn't know if you met her, but there was a very touch and go period where she was recovering from that first unsuccessful surgery in a coma for maybe a week, induced, and I'm telling you this because when I visited her, she's also very interested in plants and botany, and I brought her a potted plant that I had created of three herbs that I knew that she really liked. And I brought it, many people show up in a hospital with cut flowers, maybe a bouquet, but this was a potted thing, which I don't think was as sanitary, and I don't think they really wanted it in her room, but I snuck it in there. And when I put it on, sort of held it at her chest, and she couldn't yet speak really in more than one word, but she just stuck her fingers straight in the dirt. And I didn't expect her to do that. And at the moment I thought, oh man, I'm going to get in so much trouble for this, because it's like this, but we love that memory and laugh about it together still, because I want her to smell those smells. She's someone who loves smells, and there was lemon balm and rosemary and thyme. And those were like vocab words that she built back in that first week of relearning how to talk. Oh my God, this is so intense. I haven't really thought about all this herb gardening that I've done. It's really very, minimalist herb gardening.
I absolutely love it though. And we have such a connection, I think, as humans, that we need to be in the dirt. Like something happens to us when we haven't seen the ground or the water or the open sky for a long time. I like that we're veering off in this direction. I really do. And this is kind of the thing that happens on coming back, is I'll ask you about your lost story and then a couple other questions, and we'll kind of just, grief is a meandering path. And it's so cool that herbs and plants and smells and dirt. I think it's good clean dirt. I don't know about it not being sanitary in a hospital, but I think it's good clean dirt.
Yeah, no, I agree.
To get put in there, I absolutely love it. And the idea of reclaiming spaces, even hospital rooms with a little bit of dirt or plants, is really refreshing. Oh, that's cool. I kind of want to go back to the months, days, weeks, years after the loss of your friend. Kind of, where was your heart emotionally, kind of the wandering space of navigating this for the first time?
It's so hard to, I'm a crier, so I'm doing my my level best here to navigate how to talk about this. Okay. I was in Saratoga Springs when we first caught wind of this, and it was on Facebook. And I was checking Facebook after a little recording session that we did. And there was a picture of him, And it was like a fun picture. And somebody posted a sentence like, catch you on the other side, brother, or something kind of, to me, a bit flippant, or it could have been interpreted in a couple of ways. I thought, what's that about? And then I started reading the comments, and it was, I'm so sorry. Oh, those type of comments that make you go, oh shit, what happened? Like, wait a minute. Am I reading about this in a Facebook comment thread? Like, why haven't
my life? Is this really happening?
What is happening? I mean, I got angry, honestly, because I don't think that's the appropriate way to find out something like that. So I immediately called the couple of friends who I know, would have seen him more recently. And then we were just crying and processing, and it was full on. And we're all dispersed all around the country because that's what happens with your college friends. So there were a lot of long phone calls that night. And then, like I said, we sorted out a way to rendezvous at the land where he grew up. His family was hosting. And when I walked into the yard, I walked onto the deck. I had never met his parents before. He's actually someone who has birth parents and adoptive parents who all know each other, and who I had heard about for many years but never met. And I just started crying. So, like, I just started crying when I saw basically his eyes were in, as it turns out, his adoptive mother. But she just looked at me. I said, you don't know me. But she said, I don't, it doesn't matter. I can see how much you love my son. And she just gave me like the most massive mom hug. And I felt so welcome in this place I'd never been. And everywhere, were pictures of him from every age, and friends from every era and every part of his family, and stories. And like I said, it was really an incredible celebration of his life, and a dizzying experience. His body was there, which they had sprung from the New York City hospital and driven in the dead of night up to New Hampshire. I was very impressed with that. I didn't know you could do that. I thought that was pretty amazing. And yeah, I feel like there was an art project on the table. There was some kind of like fabric flags that we were all decorating and hanging, and that was a really constructive way to focus if you wanted to sit and do that. His daughter, I think, was 8 or 9 and was running around and being a kid, which was amazing. And yeah, I've sort of reached the edges of my memories of that day, but I really did connect. I think what happens is you see all your mutual friends and immediately rattle off to each other like every fact or memory or image from the past that you don't want to forget, because that from this point on, it's up to us now to remember.
Yeah. Can you, I'm getting this image now, or even this phrasing now, of inheriting memories becoming the new keepers of memories as we lose our loved ones around us. And I'm curious, because we haven't mentioned his name yet, but what is the name of the person you lost, and just who was he to you in your life? A little bit more about him as opposed to just a
okay, statement. Sure. Thank you. Well, not only did he have 2 families, essentially, but he also had 2 names.
He's a man of duality in every way.
I knew him as Hoobie. Hubie Van Riel, and Hubie. And then I believe his actual name was Pahu Van Riel, which his bio mom told me means a sacred bundle of sticks. I think Pahu is a native word. Anyway, he was known when he was little as Pahu, and then he became Hubie, and then he was Hubie all through college, and then became Pahu again. So I have some friends from New York City who, like the Brooklyn crowd, who knew him as a dad, and at that point he was back to Pahu. So we were really good friends. It's hard to elaborate too much on the way that group of people in the theater department at Bard College were like a large, somewhat dysfunctional family, but we're really close. So we went through a lot together. He was a year older than me, so I think as a freshman I really admired him and the other sophomores, and sort of like tried to emulate them all. And then we just all became really good friends.
That's so cool. And I love the surprise name.
Yeah.
That's too funny. Because then you're almost like, wait, what kind of past is this coming from? You know, you're trying to smuggle things out of the country, or, you know, like an alibi, or like, have you authored a book that I don't know about? Which is always fun with another.
The funny thing is that all the people who knew him from all those different chapters knew the same guy, though. That the multiple names was not at all relational to any kind of multiple personas.
Oh, sure. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Yes, that's always the first thing that jumps to mind, though, when you hear somebody has a different name. Like, oh, who are you? You know, moonlight.
Yeah,
that's too funny.
Yeah, he was a really great actor. He was a really great innovator. He used to invent things. I remember he also wrote songs. He also played guitar. He was in the middle of making an album when he died, and I would really like to help finish it one day. We talked about that and haven't made it happen yet, but I'd like to get there. He invented something. When you carry a guitar in a hard shell case, it's more well protected. But if you live in New York City and you ride the subway, you might carry it in what's called a gig bag, which is a soft shell case. And then the tuners at the top get knocked, and it gets knocked way out of tune. So he invented this thing that fit over the top of your guitar. It clipped on like a little hat onto the top of your guitar headstock, and it just provided a little bit of extra protection. It's called the Graduate 2000. I still own one, which is got my initial in it, which he made and sent me because he knew I played guitar.
That is so cool.
He invented all sorts of cool things. Yeah, I that was one of the neatest things about meeting people who'd been hanging out with him more recently, was hearing about some of his newer inventions, many of which were fun for his kid. And I think, that was what he was always really crafty and innovative and coming up with wacky approaches to solving problems. At the Bard Theater Department back in the day, these days there's a beautiful theater there. When we were there, it was a black box theater where almost everything was old and in need of repair, which meant we learned to repair everything. And so, we were a crafty bunch.
That's so much fun. And I love that he kind of left that energy behind for you also.
Yeah, I recently cleaned out a closet, found my Graduate 2000. It's called that because it looks kind of like a mortarboard.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Like
one
of those graduation hats. Exactly. So I found it the other day, and I knew I had it, but just like holding it in my hand was pretty powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And grateful that I have that. I have also some other recordings that he sent me of his songs, and all of them very like hand lettered packaging. So all that stuff becomes pretty precious.
Oh, absolutely. And it's so true for any of these like tidbits that we find after loss. I'm curious now because we are talking about guitars and musical instruments and all that jazz. How Hubie's death affected your music or your ability to create, period, and then kind of where the song came from.
Well, we had a show in Keene, New Hampshire, maybe the day or two after, and I was a mess. Like I had to tell the audience what was going on because it seemed that every single song related in some way and made me cry. So that was a challenging period. And I've had moments like that. Actually, this is reminding me, our dear friend Sonia Cohen attended one of our shows a month to the day before she died of cancer. She was a childhood friend, and having her in the audience, very frail, but completely herself, had that same effect where every single song took on a meaning that related to her for me, and so I think that's a period of time. Sometimes there are songs that are poetic and obtuse enough to allow all sorts of personal meaning in, and that's maybe the best kind of song. And wow, I'll even segue into the fact that my dad, Jay Unger, is pretty well known in the fiddle and violin world for having composed an instrumental called Ashokan Farewell. It's a beautiful tune that Ken Burns used as the PBS Civil War series theme. And so for people who watched that, and for people who knew the tune before that or in other ways, it's everyone. It's just like people in the fiddle world, people in the violin classical world, everywhere know this tune and know it as something that makes you cry, even though it has no words. So you're completely injecting the meaning into it, or you're remembering the moving scene from the documentary maybe, or something from your own life that you associate with it. It's been played at countless weddings, funerals, and all sorts of celebrations. I have a friend whose dad passed away a couple of years ago, and she sent me a video of, I believe it was her uncle performing the tune on a harmonica at this service. It was really amazing. All sorts of people out there who I don't know who have this association with the tune. And that is to say, sometimes there's space within music to process a feeling. And there's not that space anywhere, in our lives. So music absolutely, even without necessarily tugging at your heartstrings particularly, it creates this safe environment in which whatever's happening can happen more fully. And I try to write songs where I do that myself, and then I'm inviting you to do it. And then I realize, through that tune of my dad's and the lots of other waltzes and beautiful airs and things that he plays, and even the lively fiddle tunes. I cry when I hear fast tunes sometimes because it makes me nostalgic or happy, or I cry tears that I don't even understand. But I think, it's definitely, I've definitely had situations with this new song, When My Story Ends, where people came up to me afterward who were very freshly experiencing a loss, and they were blindsided by my song. It might have been a little more than they had bargained for when they set out to go to an evening of live music and entertainment, and they weren't really thinking that was going to happen. So I haven't had anyone complain, but I have had that wow, oh man, when I heard those first couple lines, I thought, do I have to run out of the room? And that's understandable. There's all sorts of levels of ready. you know.
So would you say that music, performing music, writing this song is what helped you come back from his death? Or were there some other things, people, outlets that supported you as well?
Honestly, I think connecting with his family, and that made it feel very real, which otherwise it wouldn't have felt.
Sure.
And I needed that immediately. And then writing a song that I sing over and over and over is a really good way of processing. And the song isn't 100% about Hoobie and that loss. It's about, I suppose it's really more about me after it. You know, it's about me now, looking back on what I hope, and I've thought about artists like Kurt Cobain or other people who left behind songs where, okay, now the person's gone and we're going to play back this lyric and draw a meaning from it. I kind of am acutely aware that while I'm not as famous as Kurt Cobain, there's plenty of people who might pull out a song of mine if I'm gone and go, here's the line that tells us what we want to hear now that she's not here to say anything. So I guess I was almost writing my own epitaph or obituary or something. It just sounds creepy, but
not on this show. This is the place for it.
It's like fantastic. It's sort of like some version of a creative living will or something like that. I basically am just trying to lay it out there, like, I hope we got to say goodbye, and if we didn't, we're cool. Like, whatever it was, it's okay. and I have a verse at the end that I call my happy agnostic verse, because I consider myself to be one of those. The word agnostic just makes you think like confused or undecided, but I'm happily unknowing. And the verse says, what do you see in the trees or the soaring of a dove? Is it a father's plan or a mother's love, or a universe just swirling in the stars up above? I don't know, but it fits me like a glove. And I guess it's corny and very direct, but what it means to me is, some people will state certain things in nature as evidence of divine creation by a single, cloud man hand or whatever. And then some folks will take that same beautiful object in nature as evidence for science or Mother Nature or, chemistry or the Big Bang or so I guess I asked the question. I'm not really answering it. I'm just asking, what do you see? It could be any of these things, and I don't know, but I don't have to know because I'm a part of it. Whatever it is, that's what I know. I know I'm a part of it. He was a part of it. We're all a part of it. And I feel like experiencing loss and being close to death, or not that I was personally close to death, but I felt I was close to and dealing with the ideas of death in a real way that is unusual. It really made me want to be alive and want to realize how well I fit into what you might even call the community of life that's beyond just humanity. That's all living things, all of nature. I really feel like, just like we were talking about, sticking your hands into the dirt or smelling the plants, and just, I don't want to lose that connection for a single minute while I'm lucky enough to still have it.
Gosh, that gives me chills. I've gotten chills more times in this interview than I care to admit, and I think it's because walking alongside nature is something that resonates so closely with me. But yeah, bringing it full circle, stick your hands in the dirt, be alive, be a part of it. Yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah. And I hope, and I'm not trying to poke fun at anyone who has very concrete beliefs, spiritual beliefs. I hope that verse is written with enough of an open door to just say, it's all good.
I'm wondering for sure, as we're wrapping up the show today, where people can find your song for Hoobie When My Story Ends, and also just where they can find you and Mike and your work and what you're cranking out in the music world.
Thanks so much. Yeah. Well, Mike Miranda is my husband and musical partner for almost 20 years, and I'm Ruth Ungar, and we have a band that's called the Mammals. And we started the Mammals a long time ago with our friend Tao Rodriguez Seeger, who's the son of Pete Seeger, and grandson of Pete Seeger. And Tao, being raised in that tradition, we're sort of Hudson Valley folks. So we connected and started this band. And then there was a period of time where Mike and I traveled around as Mike and Ruthie. So we have recordings under the Mike and Ruthie name with the Y at the end, and also under the Mammals. And our newest album, the Mammals album Sunshiner, has the song When My Story Ends that we've been talking about. It's available everywhere that you find music, but if you want to connect directly to us, I would go to themammals.love, Love, believe it or not, at the end of that website. So you can find the whole album there. And there are a few other songs that, to me, really connect on this theme a little bit. There's one called Maple Leaf that I also wrote that, to me, is about really staying connected to being alive and being grateful for that as long as we can. And Mike's title track, Sunshiner, is a pretty beautiful song. The chorus, yes, my daddy was a miner, but I'm going to be a sunshiner, kind of harkens back to the old mining songs. And it also, I think, while honoring the past, the recent past, it's a look toward the future of renewable energy and moving forward into this next chapter. So there's a lot in the album. I think it takes a few listens to finally come up with what the overarching theme is. But I think the theme of Sunshiner is really shining your light as brightly as you can, and staying connected and staying with what makes a difference for you and the people right around you, and then seeing where that takes us as a whole.
That makes my heart so happy. And I love that, just like Grief, your album has these layered meanings. You're like, I'm going to go over this again and again and again and again. And you listen to it with different ears every time you come to it too. And I think grief and music are very parallel in this way. So I've enjoyed this conversation a lot, because music is something that I've carried with me since before I could talk. And my mom visits me a lot that way. And so I just love this multifaceted, it's a deep level. It's exactly what you said earlier, that music talks to us in a way that goes beyond speaking and lets us drop into that place of, okay, now I'm opened up to anything happening. Music is almost like another permission slip that lets us grieve, which is really cool. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so in awe of you and your husband, Mike, and your work together as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. I love that music is a permission slip. That's
love
awesome.
It.
I'm going to keep that.
1, 2, 3, 4. say goodbye to all my friends when my story ends, when my story ends. And if I don't, I pray that we have made amends when my story comes.
So that's all for this episode of Coming Back. Thank you endlessly to Ruth Ungar for joining me today to talk about the death of her friend Hubi and for sharing this wonderful song with us. Ruth came back by going to nature, connecting with Hubi's family and others who loved him, and by writing this song, When My Story Ends. You can find a link to the Mammals website where you can find all of their music, which I've been listening to all week, in the show notes. Join me for Facebook Live this Monday, July 2nd at 1 o'clock Central Time, where we'll talk about navigating hospice care for the first time and some resources that can help you do that. Come sail with me and now 4 fellow grief growers on the 2019 bereavement cruise by requesting more information at comingbackcruise.com. If this show has changed the way you see grief and loss, go to patreon.com/ShelbyForsythia, where you can pledge for as little as $1 per month and get some very cool podcast rewards for doing so. If you liked what you heard today, you can also support the show by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and by telling a friend about Coming Back, because you never know what someone you love is going through. Thank you so much to Mr. Addie Goldstein, who composed our theme music. You can find me on Facebook at Shelby Forsythia, Intuitive Grief Guide, Instagram at Grief Guide Shelby Forsythia, or simply shelbyforsythia.com. If you'd like to leave a question or a comment for a future show, leave a voicemail or text 312-725-3043 or email me at shelby@shelbyforsythia.com, subject line podcast.
What do you see in the trees, or the soaring of the dove? Is it a father's plan, or a mother's love, or a universe that's swirling in the stars up above? I don't know, but it fits me like a glove. And I hope I get to say goodbye to all my friends when my story ends, when my story ends. And if I don't, I pray that
As always, my dear grief growers, it was beautiful sharing this space and time with you today. I see you, I am proud of you and the work that you're doing in the world. And I love you. Because even through grief, we are growing.